you get this kind of question that we're also seeing here. And if I type something in like just music, it immediately appears and we see it. So this is just also to see if everyone else is kind of with me and arriving. So this is more kind of like, as I said, the introductory slide to see that yeah, we're all here and we're kind of getting logged into this system. 3 people have answered so far, and I think we're all getting a bit triggered by the music, so that's actually quite nice. But there was also aspects of book reading, yeah, cool stuff that can also be done when in quarantine. Okay, so I think now with 7 people, I would say most of you have arrived, and we're getting into the mood of answering our questions, and we hope that you will do that again also during the presentations. We have kind of like also as a setting the scene question, just your personal assessment, maybe if you would say that culture for social progress, so always in this connection, is a very hot and important topic in your region, which obviously the fast ones would say yes it is, a moderately important topic in your region, or not an important topic in your region, or if you actually don't know, that's fine too. And I click that now because I'm not representing a region. So, and then you see, there it is, the little one, that's me. So I would still wait a little bit for other colleagues to arrive. So we had 7 answers before, so maybe we can hit the 7 also for this one. And we hope that in the discussion later on, we can also hear from you, especially those that say that it is a very hot and important topic. So yeah, cool. So we are now at 8 people. I haven't counted how many we are actually participating. But I think that already gives us an indication that there is a kind of like, it's a good topic to talk about, and you know why you're here. And with this, I would give the floor to the 2 colleagues from our project team that are going to set the scene and give a short presentation. Apolline Terrier from Technopolis and Lena Tsipuri from the University of Athens are both here and prepared to have a few introductory words as well. And the floor is now yours.
Okay,
and I hope
good.
Yeah, it works. Good.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. So I'll be doing the first few slides, and then Lena will go on. We be prepared, which was based on the background paper that I think you received, and hope you had time to maybe read or skim through. Anyway, we're just going to review the most important points here anyway. So a short definition, explanation of what is culture, and then we'll go on to look a little bit into the classification that exists and why it's important for our discussion today. Then the link between culture and EU SPI, and then last but not least, measuring culture, and that's where we'll be putting you in, you know, helping us at least answer some of the questions. Slide. Okay. So the definition of culture, obviously here we took the UNESCO definition, which is the one that everyone more or less agrees on. Maybe it's important here to just still mention the fact that there is an ongoing scholar discussion around the concept of culture. But for the purpose of today's event, let's say we're going to set the ground in a more broad light. So here, culture is a set of distinctive spiritual, material, intellectual, and emotional features of society or a social group. Obviously, it not only encompasses the sense of art, literature, but also lifestyles, way of living together, value system, that's an important one, traditions and beliefs, obviously. So it's important to consider that culture is also a sense, in a sense, it's belonging to a group or a society. So, so this is why it's not only limited to national, racial, ethnic, or religious affiliations, but also what we think is normal, abnormal. So this is where we concluded in the paper and here as well that it is absolutely critical because it influences how we act on a daily basis and how we also act with the others. And I think the current is a very interesting light on culture in different countries and how we reacted to this outbreak across the world. Anyway, next slide, please, Elke. Yeah, okay. So we did a short, but important classification of culture. So I think it's useful to make a distinction first between embodied and tangible culture. Embodied culture has to do with how you're shaped by your environment, basically. So how your family, how the school you attended, how the society in which you evolved made you who you are and the sort of culture that. And then there is the tangible culture, which is the one that I think comes to mind the easiest when one mentions the word culture, which is the one you see, the one you visit, the one you, let's say, admire. So cultural heritage, paintings, culture, etc., etc. The other aspect is not only the culture that exists, be it embodied or tangible, but also how you participate in it, whether it's active, which is called primary participation, or whether you just sort of take it in, is what we call secondary participation. So whether you're an actor or not, but then we basically crossed over these two classifications, and this is where you can see if you're, let's say, a painter, then you're a primary participant because you're creating something, you're actively acting, let's say, but you're also interacting with something tangible, like canvas, let's say. So it's tangible culture and being an active participant. And then the other aspect, which I think is just as important and it's really coming less naturally to mind, has to do with this primary and secondary action towards embodied culture. So, for example, the people who just drive culture in a society in this more, let's say, well, embodied, so not tangible version. So this has to do with your teachers or even politicians to some extent, and how they interact and how they drive forward some questions or not. Obviously, something to remember is those different dimensions, let's say, or boxes, they're not hermetic. I'm sure you have in mind many examples of on one being beginning a secondary actor or a participant to tangible culture and then moving on to being a primary, and it can be done within even the same experience, let's say. So obviously this classification is exceptions, and this is something that is moving a little bit around. So in that light, we'd like to have an idea of, in your opinion, what is most important for social progress, be it tangible and embodied culture, or if it's being active or being a passive actor of culture. So we have here a slide, so it goes from not at all important to extremely important. So I'll give you maybe 30 seconds or a minute to reflect on this and and vote if you wish to. Okay, I see it moving. Okay, I think everyone who wanted. So it's interesting to see that embodied culture. So this aspect that has to do with more. It's changing. Okay, it's actually pretty much all the same. It's interesting. Everything is all important. So I think we got 10 participants. That should be about everyone who wanted to basically express an opinion. Well, I personally find it, just to react very quickly on this result, of super interesting that it's basically all considered extremely important and all at the what I would call the same level. So I think we can reflect on that further later. But for the rest, I'll leave Lynn explain a little bit the relationship explain.
Hello from my side as well. I hope you can hear me. Is that okay? Yes, good. So the difficulty of this exercise that we are doing today is that we need to link culture to the social progress indicator that we are working on. And I think it's clear, and it was also clear from your answers, that culture is very important. But to link the culture to social progress is more tricky, because I think if you look at this very simple picture, that culture contributes to SPI, so the arrow that is in the red circle, okay, everybody agrees. On the other hand, there is no doubt that culture is, or at least part of culture, is facilitated in countries where social progress is captured and visible. So there is this bidirectional relationship, and we want to know what are the direct and indirect effects of culture into the different dimensions and components of social progress as they are captured by the EU SPI. So it's not a discussion about culture in general, not even a discussion about culture and social progress in general, but also on how this can be measured. So can I have the next slide, please? So first of all, we have to examine whether there is a connection or not. And if we look at the various savants discussing the issue, culture is a human right. And of course, as a human right, it is a cornerstone of social progress. Now, how this can be measured and proven, that's more tricky. Culture is also a vital component to civil society, democracy, urban development, and international relations. In that sense, also, in particular in today's globalized world, you cannot discuss culture without thinking of social progress. And last but not least, we all see in various studies, unfortunately, not systematic, not at the regional level, not really fully corroborated by quantitative evidence, but still we know there is a significant positive effect of culture and happiness. So happiness and social progress, it's not the same thing, but they are undoubtedly strongly interconnected. So we do need to look at these generic issues and say, okay, if culture is important for happiness, if culture is a human right, if culture is important to all aspects of social progress, then obviously it is also in generic terms, culture and SPI are linked. Now, what we have, which is studies that are more concrete and justified and corroborated, there are two areas of culture. The first is physical and mental health. You can see in the background document that there has been quite a lot of research, mainly by psychologists and medical doctors, and they see how culture really contributes to people to either improve or maintain their mental health. And on the other hand, culture also enhances social capital. Now, this is a little bit of an indirect connection. What is social capital? Social capital is a sense of belonging, and by belonging, people offer the best of themselves to society, which means that if culture contributes to social capital, then people will be more likely to be tolerant to migrants, to be tolerant to diversities, to be ready to help people with disabilities. So via social capital, culture becomes an important contributor to social progress. I don't want to go into the psychological details, but you know, it increases our control, it empowers people, it cultivates both our romantic or our human human selves and our logical thinking. And in that sense, people who have a sense of belonging, they obviously do more for society. And if we all do more for society, then social progress is automatically achieved. If you think at today's real problems of the coronavirus, that's a very clear case. If we sit at home, we are asked to sit at home. The Opera of Paris, several theaters around Europe are offering now free spectacles. So people who had tickets to the opera, but not only them, they can now see the performance in their house. This is social capital because the opera does not gain anything from that. If we stay at home, although we know we are not sick, it's social capital because we don't want other people, no, I mean the other way around. People who are sick stay at home because they don't want other people to get sick. And we don't go out because if we get sick, we're going to further proliferate the virus. So social capital is terribly important. And then we need to, can we see the next slide, please? To remind you what the social progress indicators are to see these basic elements of happiness, of social capital, of our mental health based on culture, how these can be translated into the basic dimensions of the social progress index, which are basic needs, well-being, and opportunity. I hope you all remember them, and they are not all equally linked to culture, but culture is somehow a background for many of them. Can I have the next slide then, please? So let me ask you first to react again based on your own perceptions. Can you rank, but this time you have to rank it, for which of the EU SPI components you think culture is most relevant? And the response is both based on what Apolline and I have said until now, but also on your own gut feeling, because we want to hear from you rather than only ask you to react to what we say. So do you think culture is important for basic needs? You remember basic needs is food, shelter, clean water. Is it important for well-being? That means secondary education, environmental aspects, or is it for the opportunities of society where in particular social capital plays a great role because we are talking about the importance of police, the importance of tolerance in various areas, and of course, tertiary and lifelong education. Aha, I think I'll wait a little bit because I'm, well, let's see, there are some changes appearing while you vote. And I'm so happy to tell you that's how I would vote as well. Yes, all of it, people do need culture and culture is important, but on the other hand, culture does not contribute to having enough support and shelter and clean water. These are more mundane aspects. There is then another question we want to ask, which refers to the channels linking culture to SPI. Even more tricky to respond because we have ourselves somehow asked whether these channels are really, they are not the only channels, but somehow they are important or less important channels to link culture to social progress. So let me just explain, because I see nobody is responding yet. Is culture as a right an integral part of social progress? That means, without it, there's almost no social progress. Here we have lots of responses again. Respect of diversity and social cohesion together with happiness ranks top. Okay, all the channels are important. The most important one is respect of diversity and social cohesion. Okay, we'll have all these responses down in the fact sheet at the end after the presentation and the group discussion today. But what I see is that you all feel, yes, it is important. It's definitely, all of them are definitely above average in terms of importance. Now, are there any of the resources devoted to culture in your region following a social progress rationale? This is a question. It froze. Can you hear me now? Hello? Now, okay, sorry. It seems there was an interruption in my computer, which is in a very, very, very bad shape at the moment because of the who say that it is okay. It blocked again. No, unblocked. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, the three of you who said that resources devoted to culture follow a social progress rationale, I think it would be extremely interesting for us to hear how this is linked. Now, let me go to the next slide and give you a few ideas on how we tried to link the manifestations of culture and their impact on SPI dimensions. And this is an approach we discussed between us. It doesn't mean it's the only right one, but if we try to look at the different forms on how culture contributes to social progress, we see that embodied and tangible culture, so the more passive part in terms of embodied, but which you can really feel, is via manifestation of human rights, is an integral part of social progress. And we have this classification from top to down. And we think that if we want to integrate culture into the SPI indicators in the future, somehow we have to take the highest number of checks into the equation and into the indicators, which would mean civil society and democracy and respect of diversity and social cohesion. But we are not absolutely sure. This is an exercise in progress. We have an additional work package in our project where we are going to discuss these possibilities further, and in particular, try to see how this can work. So there are several interesting cases, like the governance and the social role of cultural institutions in the case of Belgium. Communities, you know, in Belgium, the communities have a very, very high power of policy making, and they have exclusive competence for cultural policy and its implementation. So certain large cultural institutions remain, they have the responsibility, and some of these cultural institutions are even scientific or non-scientific establishments, but they believe that the governance of these cultural institutions, can we go to the next slide, please, has an impact on the objectives, resources, and monitoring and evaluations of their activities. So the Ministry of Science Policy has listed these citizens as one of its impacts promoting the organization of social progress activities. So you see that the ministerial actors within the communities to see to what extent this plays an active role of cultural institutions for well-being. This is a case, of course, we have from the literature. We don't know, and I don't believe it's formally announced, whether this has an impact on the way funds are distributed between the different organizations. But it would be a possibility. And in that sense, I think the Belgian case is food for thought for all ministries of science or culture or whoever does this in your country, to take into consideration the contribution of the cultural activities, not only to happiness in general and leisure, but on how it really contributes to social progress. So now we need your contribution again. It's not clear which manifestations are more important, while how they can be measured remains a challenge anyway. So we will ask to have your input as to evaluate the impact of each of culture's manifestations on SPI and select the best measures. And now it's for you again, and we have a big number of questions. Can we get the next question? Okay, so what are these particular indicators? You know, I gave you the Belgian example about museums and art galleries, but even, you know, going to the movies may be a way to contribute to your well-being, to your social progress, either in terms of health, you know, distress, or in terms of education. We learn things in the cinemas, we learn things in the movies, we learn things in the museum. There's a difference between cinemas and cinema attendance. Cinemas is the tangible aspect. Cinema attendance is the embodied. So there are 10 cinemas in your area, but you never go. There are 10 cinemas in your area, and you go very frequently. There's a difference. So I just wanted to explain this because it was also a discussion between ourselves when we tested it. You know, what is the difference? So that's how we explained the difference. I think we have to wait a few more moments, you know, and this is also, of course, a matter of taste. So don't hesitate to say, you know, I prefer landmarks and sightseeing, whereas other people prefer to be closed in a museum. That's all absolutely valid. So we are actually getting your feedback here. Okay, I would totally agree, actually. You know, having cinemas in the neighborhood is not so important. What is more important is what you do with this thing, your attendance, how useful they are. We have a continuation with other types of indicators, their usefulness. So if we're ready, can we go to the next slide? Same thing again. This is more, you know, it's getting more tangible rather than embedded when we speak about jobs and culture's contribution to employment. The size of enterprises, I don't see people reacting. Okay, good, great. I may give you a few more seconds, but as I warned you, we have more of this. Okay, enterprises seem to be important. Enterprises and employment, I think, are ranking top. I'm happy to see that none of these are considered as irrelevant. Okay, now we have the next round. We go into a little bit of monetary aspects, so value added, turnover, trade. And then we have the participation of where you go, what is important. Is it useful to go to the cinema, to go to live performances, cultural sites, practice of artistic activities? Practice of artistic activities is best for all of you. Yes, trade, I agree. Trade is, you know, the monetary indicators are less valued. There is one point in the background paper, which we chose not to present here, which is the meaning of money into this whole area. And we said this is an indirect aspect. So we will not go into detail on this. And that's why I see it's great that you also rank them very low when we speak about the monetary aspects of culture. Let's go into the next one. Okay, the internet is terribly important. Online, not so much. Not so much. Let's wait a little bit to see if it changes. You know, don't forget we're going, because this is a continuing list, we're going to compare all your responses on the different areas. Okay, so let me thank you for participating again. There are a couple of indicators that have been used by other countries. So other countries not participating in the SPI, I mean Germany and UK in the past, UK were of course part of the SPI, but some countries have their own measurement of social progress. And you can see that we try to identify the measurable indicators. You remember I said at the beginning, our first task is to make sure culture links to social progress. The second is to see what types of channels are important. And then our difficult task at the end is to make indicators to use it. And you see that in the UK, for instance, there is an indicator on how engaged are people with or participating in arts or cultural activities, and people who do it more than 3 times per year, well, they seem to be active and benefiting from culture. Canada is apparently a lot more sensitive. So average percentage of time spent on the previous day in arts and cultural activities. These are surveys, average number of hours in the past year, average attendance per performance, and so on and so forth. New Zealand is more sophisticated, partly on the ability to express, identify, the ability to express and identify, and this is a percentage of adults who said it was easy or very easy to express their identity in New Zealand. And this has, of course, to do with local communities, Aborigines in Australia and the Maori speaking in New Zealand, and in countries where you have this problem. And we've seen such problems in some European countries with segregation, for instance, Roma, but more and more we have the problem of migrants. So this is an indicator that might be interesting for our future. In Germany, a very practical indicator, travel time to educational service and cultural facilities, because of course people will participate more if the cinema is next door, if they have an opera in their hometown, than if they have to travel 2 hours by car to go to the opera, or take the bus for half an hour to go to the cinema. So these are examples of indicators that we will consider in the future. And there is a whole list of available indicators in Eurostat, which we have looked at. Unfortunately, some of them may not be available at the regional level, but you see that such indicators are possible. There is a second slide also. I think time is running fast, and it's very interesting to hear the cases from the region, so I want to cut it short as much as possible. So let's do some rating again on the potential indicators. I'm not going to speak here because I want to let you do it very quickly. There are quite a few slides to do that. So please start rating. What do you think are the useful indicators? And try not to consider them very useful, because you will have to choose only a few. So be very stingy with your ratings, and you're free to rate them very low as not useful at all or almost useful. But please go do it quickly so that we will have time to listen to the presentations from the regions. Oh, again, very useful. No, not very useful. Okay. Okay, if we go into the next one, we are all adults, and time spent at computer games, we tend to tell our children this is negative for culture. There is, however, quite a lot of evidence that it improves skills, and in that sense, it's not only lost time. Depending on our age, time reading books may sound more interesting. So And of course, when you rate this time, don't think of ourselves closed in our houses and teleworking because of the coronavirus. Think of us in our normal lives, which we hope will come back soon. Okay, if that's all, let's go to see how much money you're ready to satisfy, to sacrifice for your cultural goods and services. Do you think culture should be free of charge, low cost? I mean, you know, we can't expect the theaters to work free of charge, but we can expect quite a few channels to be low cost. Yeah, it's a lot of information to digest, so I can understand why it takes time. And I'll try to shut up and not distract you from reading. I think 12 is the maximum we get, Elke, right? So we go to the next. You see here that some indexes are composite indexes. And if it's interesting for you, we can send you more detail, of course. Okay, 5 more to go. You see that some indicators are very closely connected to previous ones. So we're going to check whether the responses are compatible. Perfect. All done. Well, cultural attendance, I think it's a good message to the ministries of finance, actually. They need to give more money for cultural attendance. Let's go to the next slide. here you see two of the indicators at the beginning linked directly to SPI, which is ethnic minority, the ethnic minorities or other minorities. Here you have a very clear difference in favor of open space. And this is the very last one, national parks, again related to the Natura indicator in SPI. Great. So before I thank you for your attendance, I want to say that if you look back at the different indicators, you will see that some of them are really objective and quantitative. Others are more a perception. We need to work on them, but you are very, very welcome if you have any additional ideas or you believe we should look at other or focus more on specific aspects in the months to come and convince the European Commission on how to integrate culture into social progress. We'll be very, very grateful for anything more you send us. Thank you for your attendance, for your attention then, and I'm looking forward to listen to you.
Yes, so without further ado, the floor would go to our colleagues from Romania. And I think Tonya is in the process of giving them the right to show now their screen.
Yes, Livio, you have been made co-host, so you can share your screen.
Yes, I think there it is. And yeah, so the floor is with Livio. I hope we can all hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm glad to hear you and to see you now again. I will pass the introductory details about our institution because we talked about in the previous meetings. The main activity is made by as an intermediate body for regional operation program. And we work with local authorities and with also with the private sector in our region, Bucharest.
Livio, can you please pass on to presentation modes so that you have full screen? At the bottom of, yeah, thank you.
Now, it's okay?
Yes, great.
Okay. The importance of cultural development, we agree that this is based on the interaction and cooperation of a wide range of actors who form the cultural ecosystem. The public institutions, civil society, and private sector all have to be involved in a cultural activity. Some data about the cultural activities in Romania. The statistics show that 24% of the population participating at least once in cultural activities in a year, 37% participating at visits to a historical cultural park, only 6% attending a concert or a musical show. And regarding the household expenditure for culture, the data show that only 2.45% is this. There are not so many data at regional level, but we found some of them. In Bucharest Silco region, entertainment institutions, the number is quite similar in the last years, about 45 institutions. The number of shows and concerts increased in the last year at more than 7,000, and also the number of spectators with 1.75 million in 2018. There are some institutions dedicated to culture, the Ministry of Culture, that has the objective of increasing and diversifying the supply and supply of cultural consumption. Some measures they assume facilitating access to cultural goods and services for vulnerable categories, promoting original artistic content, cultural genres as much as possible different, promoting cultural consumption in conventional and unconventional spaces, promotion of complementary distribution channels, encouragement of the use of ICT, and also they sustain the ethnic groups and vulnerable categories. There are some hours on the public channels, television and radio, for these categories. There is also a National Institute for Cultural Research and Training, subordinated to the Ministry of Culture, the only one national institute that aims to study, research, and provide statistical data in the field of culture. And also for the training professionals who choose a career in this field. On their website, I put here, there are different studies, and maybe we can use more, and you can use also, because there are also in Romanian and English. The Romanian National Institute for Statistics, regarding the culture, emphasizing 6 dimensions. They have data about the libraries, the cinematographic exploitation and productions, entertainment institutions, museums, printing houses, radio and television broadcasts at national and also the most of them at regional level also. I talked also about the Museum of Roma Culture, founded in 2013, as an example of the involvement of the state for the minorities. There are also museums for other ethnic groups, but also started from the European framework for Roma integration and inclusion. This museum was sustained and is hosted by a foundation of the Roma activists. The most important thing, I think, for the public opinion is the historical elements. In Romania, appreciated to have a very valuable architectural heritage. There are some special law for protection, but with poor results and real involvement of the authorities. Romania confronts with an erroneous perception of the society that is to say historical monuments are only consuming funds with no visible benefits from the investment. But other data show that built heritage is a factor of local and regional development and a catalyst for cultural and social life. In the Bucharest region, there are or in Romania, there are two categories: national monuments category A and B. The first one, national interest, and category B of local interest. And in our region, there are more than 341 national interests, like the Arch of Triumph, Athenaeum, and others. And the majority, there are houses, statues, assemblies of local interest. Through the regional operational program in the previous period framework, have been restored and strengthened 6 historical monuments. That is some churches and the Palace of Patriarchy in Romania, and also the Astronomical Observer and other museums that increased the number of visitors. They had to digitalize the interior, and now as indicators, they argued the benefit of this support for their activities. In the current programming period, there are 10 projects contracted for consolidation, rehabilitation, digitalization, and increasing the number of visitors with an allocation of 25 million euro. There are also historical churches, the National Archive Building, the Palace of the National Military Circle, the National Museum of Firemen, and they assume the number will increase in the next year, the number of visitors will increase, and this will mean some more money to the local budget, and they want to reinvest in another buildings, and this to help the social progress also for the citizens. We agree that culture plays a central role in maintaining and improving the quality of life and the well-being of people and communities, the cultural values, attitudes, and beliefs that shape the nature and quality social relations. It is very hard to show directly the connection, but we are sure that our people, if we ask the street, will tell that they need to express their culture, beliefs, and they sustain the emancipation, trust, and tolerance for diversity and cooperation. It's hard to measure, but related to many indicators of social and economical progress. Instead of conclusions, we mentioned some quotes. The creative higher culture cannot be separated from the culture of the people, and culture cannot be imposed from above. Being a personal business, it must therefore live in an atmosphere of freedom, spontaneity, and national specificity. I didn't have the time to put, but also if we look at the structure of the local budgets, culture has an allocation that increased in the last years, but it's not so much as in other domains like hospitals, schools, and I don't know, or infrastructure, transport infrastructure. But the total amounts increased the last year. If you have any questions, and I can prepare some data or other information for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Liviu. I think this was a very, very interesting presentation. I enjoyed listening to you, and I would open the floor for questions. I believe if you unmute yourself, if you want to ask a question, I will try to catch those that have unmuted themselves and give you the floor. Because unfortunately I cannot see all the, this way. Lena.
Okay, if no one else has anything to say, I think what was extreme, thank you very much for the presentation. It's really very good. And I think the aspect quality of social connections for me was extremely interesting. It's towards the end somewhere where you say what maybe, yeah, the importance of culture. And then it's not a question, it's actually a very interesting, it's an observation that I think this opens a whole new debate about the quality of social relations and how culture improves the quality of social relations and leads to social capital and tolerance. And I think that's really very, very interesting. And it's good that your ministry is in this mode of thinking.
Yes. Anyone else who wants to give a comment? Yeah, or leave you a short reaction about this.
Yes, this is the structure of the Romanian government for many years. There is a Ministry of Culture, but also many dimensions are hosted by the local authorities and not by the Ministry of Culture. And sometimes there are some misunderstandings or late some problems regarding authorization in construction, so not so is not the thing doesn't work in practical like in theory to preserve also the very well the monuments maybe in this case.
So for the moment, nobody else has unmuted themselves. Apolline, yes, and Susanna. So I give the floor first to Apolline.
Very quickly, I thought it was interesting to see the 6 dimensions of culture that you had. And I noticed, I think it's in the beginning, I think it's slide 9. Yes. Yeah, I thought it was interesting you didn't have statistics on anything related to the internet and the consumption of culture online. So do you know if this is something that is also under another kind of statistics, or is this just something that is not yet really looked at in Romania?
These are the dimensions they use now because I think they started after 1990, and you can on this I will put the link of the institute because there are also information in Romanian English. You can compare in the situation each year starting with 1990 this data. And maybe internet wasn't introduced, will be introduced in the next years.
Okay, so I would give a very short remark to Susanna, and then we give the floor to our Swedish colleagues so that they have enough time to share their experiences.
No, it was just a very short comment that it was nice to see reflected some of the points that Lena and Apolline had made in the general presentation, then how they appear in the Romanian case, and some are there and some are not there, but it was very interesting. Thank you.
Okay, with this, I think our Swedish colleagues become the co-hosts now and will be invited to share their screen from Tanya.
Yeah, they are already co-hosts. I have made you leave so you can share your screen.
Yeah?
Yep.
Hello, I maybe can introduce myself. I'm Rickard Ström. I'm a coordinator of cultural affairs here on Region Västerbotten. So I work with culture. I'm a sidekick here today.
Yes, hello everybody, nice to see you again. Yeah, the case from Region Västerbotten is first, and then comes the case from Umeå with Linda. As you see here, there's some text, and the first one is the Swedish National Culture Policy. And as it says, it should be dynamic, challenging, and independent force based on the freedom of expression, and that everyone is to have the opportunity to participate in cultural life, and creativity, diversity, and artistic quality are to be integrated parts of society's development. And then there is the goal from Region Västerbotten that all residents should have access to high quality to regional culture, and that it's offered equal opportunities to create and practice culture. So it's quite high standards, I think, that everybody should have the equal opportunities to both create and to participate in culture, and equal conditions to influence, participate, and participate in social life. So the case is the process that I'm going to show is the process to develop a regional culture plan, which I believe is very, it's a good example of how you could work with culture and with the process of creating the culture plan. Important to say too is that there is a partnership model with the Swedish state, saying that there is state funds for culture, but it's still distributed to the regions. But the region they are demanded to have a culture plan in order to receive the state funds for culture. And first of all, we have also legislation on national minorities in Sweden. And the case since 2010, and the law says that in short, that minorities have the right to information in their own language, the protection of minorities' culture and language, and the right for minorities to participate and to influence. And there are 5 in Sweden: Jewish, Roma, Finnish, Tornedalers, and the indigenous population, Sami people. And the EU Västerbotten has a dedicated mission towards the Finnish and the Sami people. And you see a map of Sapmi, the whole of the Sami land, which is northern Sweden, northern Finland, northern Norway, and part of Russia. And the goal for the culture plan, the regional culture plan, as you see here, is to have a that is developed in a broader collaboration. That is that there is indicators that can be used for this to follow up the results, and that it has a clear link to other relevant strategies and plans, and that it has an integrated LGBT perspective. And the last goal is initiated by Region Västerbotten, and there's a stronger emphasis in Västerbotten than in other regions of Sweden. And below you see the priority areas. It's children and young people's right to culture, a gender perspective, the national minorities, LGBT, and civil society. And here you see the process. And it's actually 1.5 years. Step 1 is a participatory dialogue with the professional artists, national minorities, civil society, and NGOs. And we travel in the region and meet with all these different stakeholders. And the results from these discussions is then the base for step 2, where we meet with institutions such as operas, museums, theaters, libraries, and such. And with them, we form more long-term strategic discussions about different development areas. And these discussions are also linked to which areas or which projects or initiatives that will be funded. And then step 3, there's 3-level dialogue taking place at each municipality with the management, then with the civil society, and an open dialogue. And then afterwards, there's a drafting of the culture plan, and then there's the whole political process. And I find it very inspiring that they are working so hard with meeting with all kinds of stakeholders throughout the region, both civil society and with the more with the institutions. And that was it from oh sorry from Västerbotten. Will you continue, Linda?
Dear Linda, can you please unmute yourself?
Yes. Can you hear me? Liv, I can see you. Could you give me a thumbs up where you can hear me? Yeah, good.
Yeah, we can hear you. Do you also have a presentation you'd like to share?
No, sorry.
Okay. No need. I'm just asking.
No,
Okay.
I had a presentation, but it's on my work computer and I'm using my private computer from home. So
no worries.
I don't think I will even have video on because it says that the connection is a little bit unstable. So I'm thinking that this might be better.
Okay then.
Yeah. So I wanted to give you
we can hear you very well. You're breaking up as if you were away from the mic. So if you could please try again and come by the mic.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, good. Thank you. So one is a monetary one, which is that compared to other municipalities in Sweden, Umeå measures how much money we actually invest in culture. So we can see that Umeå invests most per inhabitant in culture from public funding. It's the same with leisure, so culture and leisure. And then when it comes to participation, we the number of loans at public libraries.
I'm afraid you're again breaking up. It's probably what you mentioned about the unstable connection. Can you please repeat what you were saying? You were mentioning about the, Linda, hi. I don't know if you realized you broke up, so we just missed a couple of things you were saying. You were discussing about the libraries.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
That there is a high number of, or we measure the number of loans from the number of participants in activities connected to public libraries. So every inhabitant in Umeå takes out or loans about 11 books per year in Umeå, highest number in Sweden.
Again, Linda, I'm afraid we can hear you.
Investing in culture with public funds and then measuring then the number of participants in different activities, but libraries is the one that stands out compared to other cities in Sweden. I also wanted to highlight one other thing, and that is I was involved also in starting to look at the gender balance in the culture activities. So a number of years ago, we started measuring the like music festivals, theaters, and other things, the number of men and women on stage and performing, also to look at not only the number of enterprises or people that are employed or in the culture sector, but also the gender balance within that sector, to make sure that maybe there are things we need to do to make sure that it's just as possible for women as for men to be able to support themselves working in the culture sector. And then one other thing that I wanted to highlight was that we worked a lot with co-creation. It's one of the things that we worked with in the Capital of Culture year in 2014. And the indicators connected to that is a little bit more difficult, but it's been a very clear strategy from the City of Umeå working with co-creation in the culture sector since the Capital of Culture year. And I think that one thing that highlights that is when Umeå was the 2014, the secretariat that associations involved in that year that produced the year. So that's just one way you could see that there was a lot of co-creation. And the last thing that I just wanted to mention was that we are actually now, we're making a survey in Umeå. Umeå is 130,000 inhabitants, and there's a survey that has gone out to 16,000 people in Umeå about social capital. And there are questions in that survey on participation in different cultural events. Also, of course, a lot of questions about how often we interact with other people, neighbors, family, and so on. So we're hoping that on a local level, or our aim is that on a local level, we're gonna get a number of suggestions on other indicators that we can use to measure the connection between culture and social capital. I hope you heard some of it, and that was it from me.
Thanks so much, Linda. Yeah, I think we heard quite a bit. You might see afterwards in the recording, it broke up from time to time, but it usually broke up in big chunks, and then we heard you fully for a while. So thanks a lot for the presentation. We will all, probably you can send us the presentation that you had when you're back at your work computer. Let's see if you could, that could be nice. I'll take the floor, or I ask the floor for those who want to ask a question or have a comment.
Yeah, I want to ask a question, if I may, because on both presentations, there were indicators mentioned. In the first, there were no details, but it was mentioned that there are indicators measuring progress and monitoring what is happening. And of course, the 16,000 people survey on culture and interaction and the expectation to create new interesting indicators, it is music to our ears. And I was wondering whether we could have the indicators mentioned in the first presentation as indicative on what is used, and for the 16,000 people survey, when it's going to be elaborated and you have the results, would it be possible to share it with us or even make a presentation in one of the future events? I don't mean the peer learning events, because there won't be any one more about culture, but possibly in the final conference or something like that. If you have, you know, the results of a large survey on a topic which is not sufficiently researched elsewhere, I think it would be a very, very interesting case.
Reaction, colleagues, yeah.
Yeah, hi. Talking about the indicators, Kulturrådet in Sweden, like the government, they have some indicators, and they ask, I try to find them here, and maybe we can send them later to you, all the indicators that they have. And then we have Mika, it's Myndigheten för culture analysis, and they also doing some
there's some follow-up on the work.
Yeah, and it's about how many people has been in the museums and so on. We can also send you those indicators if you want to later.
Oh, actually, I don't want the numbers. I want the type of indicators
Yeah.
and why they are selected.
Yeah, that's what I meant. I meant I can send you the type of indicators. I don't have them in front of me right now.
That would be perfect. We're happy to add them to the info package that we prepare for this event.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you. That's very helpful.
About the survey, it's a research project with the researchers from the university in Umeå, but the survey has closed, and I'm in the reference group for the survey. So it's going to be a research project over a number of years, but we've been told that we will get some initial results and go through the results of the survey before the summer. So if it would be interesting for the group, we could absolutely have a short presentation about that later, and also could invite the researcher that's responsible for the survey. It was worked a lot on social capital.
Great, I keep it in mind.
Good.
Thanks a lot. Anyone else who unmutes him or herself to get the floor for a comment or a question? Spiros.
Yes, hello. Hello, everyone.
Hey, we hear you well.
Very interesting presentations indeed. Just to add something or make a comment, in Western Greece, and generally speaking in Greece, we have the last 2 years a report by the Ministry of Culture with many regional data about creative industries. The creative industries approach considers, let's say, culture and creativity in general as a financial factor or a development factor. So we can use these reports to have some indicators and maybe enrich or combine the indicators we are planning to develop with these reports. And I have to say it's a good work generally. It's the first time that such a work was developed in Greece, and generally it's a very useful tool. On the parallel, we have also, if I'm not wrong, the European Index of Creative Industries, which has many indicators. I'm not sure if there are many indicators, at least some indicators, and an index about creativity and creative industries of the former European capitals of Europe in the past years. Let's say in Western Greece, Patras, the capital of Western Greece, was the European cultural capital about 50 years ago. So they have ranked Patras among all the other capitals of Europe, and it's something also useful. So having heard all the presentations, very interesting presentations, I think we can go on and make something really useful with these indicators referring to financial data. And on the other side, there is always the matter of perceptions. And I'm happy to, because we started this web meeting with the definition. And the definition of culture is referring to value systems, lifestyles, and so on. And actually, this was my first question in the kickoff meeting at Brussels 1.5 years ago, if we are going to somehow measure our values, because it's a qualitative indicator. For me, it's very generic, but in the same time, very useful if we want to compare many things across Europe, across about our attitude towards the global scale, and in the same time we can influence the way of thinking for the citizens in our regions. So it's very interesting. We can use many factors. I found we voted on many factors almost exhaustively, but it remains for me as an emerging how we can count or make comments on value systems and lifestyles. It's very important, and it is a mean to compare our lives in the core of our existence, let's say, in our regions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Spiros. I think we can have one more comment, like a general comment or idea or something that you would like to highlight in terms of these aspects. If somebody unmutes his or herself, I would be happy to hear eventually one more comment from your regional experiences in general on the issue.
Hi. Hi.
Hi.
Sorry, Elke. This is Marc from Catalonia. Thank you very much for your presentations on the paper and the regional experiences. It was really interesting, and it gave us a lot of ideas because we've been working on culture, not related with SPI, but on cultural aspects from some time. And I would just like to share that we did in 2017 a presentation on the European Commission on Culture on the European Parliament about public spending per capita and in terms of the budget of the different governments of Europe, and that's available in our website, and we can forward it to you. And then another aspect that I would like to comment is there were a lot of indicators, so maybe I missed some of or one of them, but I think it's important, as Linda said, that cultural access is equally distributed among the population. So I think that I just wanted to remark that an indicator measuring the participation of population and not just the attendance, I think that it was presented, but I think that's one of the most important indicators, at least for us. And that's it. Thank you very much for the presentation and the seminar.
Thanks, Marc, for highlighting these issues. Okay, if there is one more regional experience or a few sentences that you want to share from Portugal or Slovenia or so on, we would be, of course, happy to hear you either now or also at a later point. If you feel to add something on that topic, we will certainly write about it. Wanda, a few sentences from your side?
Yes, are you listening to me?
Yes, we hear you.
Okay. Thank God I had to restart my computer because I didn't have the audio when we started. Thank you all for the presentations and for the background paper. I lost Lena's presentation here, but I read the paper, the background paper beforehand, and it is an excellent document. So thank you. Well, my comment would be I was looking for some regional indicators in order to better understand what we have. And mainly it's about the performances, the number of performances and spectators in cinema and live shows and museums and the occupation rates and so on. So, well, looking at the indicators that Lena was presenting earlier, so I think that the most important ones are, at least for us, it's the ones that concern participation and satisfaction of people above all, because this means that people are involved and participating more than looking at culture as an economic activity or other kind of indicators. So I wouldn't value indicators from the labor force survey or from the ICT survey because you are when you're using the ICT survey indicators, you are already limiting for people using ICT. So I think that the most interesting ones are the ones from the ad hoc module of SILK regarding participation. And there are some interesting ones, very interesting ones that I would love to read more about them. The cultural performance, the cultural attendance, and the community cultural vitality. These ones seem very interesting as well. So, and then we have the Eurobarometer problem and the ad hoc model problem because we don't have them very frequently. So ad hoc is from 2015, and then some of them we don't have them at well, for instance, this one from ad hoc, it's only national, not even regional data. So that's it. We have some problems to tackle first, but participation and satisfaction are fundamental.
Thanks, Wanda. I think there is also time. Our recommendation will feed into a long-term process on measuring the social progress. So certainly many of our recommendations will not be able to be realized within short notice. Okay.
Now, may I just quickly intervene, because thank you really, Wanda. I think it's very, very useful what we're saying, starting by the fact that some surveys are selective and we shouldn't use them because they are biased by definition. And I think the story of participation and satisfaction is very, very nice and very. The problem, as you say, is that we don't have regular measurements, and in particular, we don't have them at the regional level. But our job here is not only to see what you have or what we have, but also to recommend strongly in the future to have something new. And I keep a note for your idea on satisfaction, because in the end of the day, it's satisfaction that counts. And I promise I'm going to have a look into it and discuss with Paula whether a question like that could be somehow incorporated.
So the time that we have allocated for the virtual meeting is practically over. If there is no urgency, I would also like to stick to this because it's good practice not to run over like too much. So if there is not an urgent business, and if I don't want to force anyone also, so of course if there, I mean, Peter, for example, if you want to say something, you're most invited, but it's also not, this is not the issue. Yeah. Now you did unmute yourself, so I would give you the floor, but let's keep it short and then close the meeting. Peter?
Yes, thank you, Elke, for just a short few words to say to everybody. Thanks, everybody, for all the presentations you made today, for these indicators that we could be using in future on future version of EU SPI. Unfortunately, due to circumstances and so on, I don't have much access to all the work files at work, as I'm working from home, and also the let's say the colleague from the regional agency who was supposed to present a little bit about the situation, as I must admit I'm not so in deep with culture and culture in let's say possible indexes. She couldn't join us, and therefore hopefully at least I'll be able to provide her with all the presentations from today's meetings, and then in the next hopefully weeks, or let's say I think most probably in April, we'll continue and provide you with some feedback from Slovenian side. Thank you all.
Amazing, thank you. Spiros, you had an urgent business?
Yes. Before closing, if I'm allowed to make an announcement for the consortium, just to spread some information. Region of Western Greece is examining the possibility of submitting, of leading a regional partnership for the European Week of Regions on October. And we are thinking, let's say, the fundamental issue, which we can, of course, formulate in the next month and make it more relevant to everyone's interest, will be the Rebrain initiative. It's something we presented 1 month ago on the Budapest meeting. It's about upscaling and rescaling skills, especially digital skills, which are due to the circumstances we are living right now seem to be very essential. And of course, we can incorporate matters and as the cultural one we spoke today. And if the partners from the consortium are interested in that, we will send an info mail tomorrow, I think, to everyone. And if you are interested, please, it will be very important to have your reply until Friday, because I think the deadline is next Friday. So I will send an email, and if you can spread it to the partners about verifying their possible interest, I think it would be something very interesting, of course, for region, for us, and for the consortium and the project also. Thank you.
Thank you so much. With this, I would thank everyone, like our speakers and the participants, and for all the discussion contributions. And you will receive an email from our side with the link to the recording and the presentations. So I just invite also Leaf, I think if you could send us the presentation, we will upload it on the page. And there is already some interest being expressed in the chat window for Spiros' proposal. So I hope all this is going on, and we will continue for the moment, at least, in the virtual way. And I'm looking forward to seeing you very soon virtually when we have put the topic of transport and mobility on the agenda, which is going to happen next month. So more information on that with the background paper, etc., in the usual way very soon. And for today, thank you very much, and enjoy your evening, and take care of yourself and of all your loved ones and of our societies. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.